So there is this video I was trying to share on my Clips channel. You can find it on BitChute. It's a talk that Kary Mullis gave, and it's called Kary Mullis, Creator of the PCR Test, the AIDS Scamdemic 1997. For those of you who don't know, Kary Mullis is the inventor of PCR, polymerase chain reaction, and he won the 1993 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for it. It's the test that is being used to quote-unquote diagnose COVID-19 in patients, and you can watch the video and pretty much figure out how he would feel about that. So Kary Mullis was the best known and most outspoken critic of Dr. Fauci that I know of. He criticized the use of AZT on AIDS patients in the 80s, but maybe I'll make another video about that. So this video of his, this talk he gave, really got me to thinking. When it comes to dismantling these broad narratives, I don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of cycle thresholds of PCR tests and how if you do too many cycles, the data becomes unusable. I don't have to get into Stefan Lanka or Peter Duesberg or any number of the countless scientists and researchers whose concerns about virology and medicine all seem to point in the same direction. All I have to do is talk about what is science and what is not science. So to use a PCR test to amplify genetic material of a virus in a patient exhibiting cold and flu-like symptoms, and then to assume causality. So you assume that the presence of that virus in that sample is the cause of the patient's symptoms is not science. So hypothetically, and this is very hypothetical, let's assume that the virus is present exclusively in the samples of those people who displayed symptoms. Even that would not prove causality. As Kary Mullis said, I'm here, you're here, did you cause me? Did I cause you? But that hypothetical reality isn't even what we have. Instead, what we have is people who test positive for the presence of the virus and show symptoms, people who do not test positive for the presence of the virus who show the exact same symptoms. We have people who test positive for the presence of the virus who show no symptoms at all. And there's this spin. It's journalistic spin with this idea of a carrier. Like, if you really stop to think about that, what that means to be a carrier, the existence of carriers proves that the virus is not the cause of the symptoms. Yes, it does. Really. That is what that means. So, it's possible that the virus, given certain bodily conditions, causes the symptoms, but we don't know that. And that's actually also not what's being said. Another thing, as I was researching this video, I came across a study that was talking about how patients who were asymptomatic but were carriers of the coronavirus, which, by the way, the coronavirus used to just be associated with the common cold. These patients who showed no symptoms had significantly higher viral load than patients who had symptoms. So the patients who were asymptomatic had more coronavirus in their bodies. So I could mention the alternative theories of viruses here. How is virology making out with Koch's postulates, by the way? Have they satisfied all of those for every virus and every disease yet? But they haven't satisfied the logic behind causation, is the truth of the matter. I could mention the alternative theories about viruses possibly being solvents that are created by the body to break down toxins. I could get into the fact that all of the major alternative theories of medicine surround the idea that a virus does not cause the disease that it is purported to cause. You have HIV and AIDS. You can look at Peter Duesberg's work. Also, Kary Mullis talked about this. You can look at the theories surrounding polio. Why did rich kids get polio but poor kids didn't? Stefan Lanka and measles. And of course, the novel coronavirus, the novel common cold, and the supposed condition known as COVID-19. But I don't want to get too into that in this video. What I will say is that according to mainstream virology, there are an estimated 380 trillion viruses that make up the human virome. And assuming that's true, do you think that before running to the media with a sensationalist headline about bat soup in a Chinese market, they open their 380 trillion page picture book and make sure that that supposedly new virus isn't already known to be part of the human virome? Do you think that they do that? I'm going to go out on a sturdy limb here and say that we don't know what causes the common cold. and we don't know what causes a lot of these diseases. And if so, we don't know which viruses cause which diseases and under which conditions. We don't know. Fred Hoyle had some interesting ideas. Carrie Mullis gives the example in that talk of boys who tested positive for HIV who were kept out of the military, despite the fact that they almost definitely did not get it sexually, and they were nowhere near San Francisco bathhouses, and that they never had AIDS. So it is possible that the presence of certain viruses in certain conditions in the body could cause illness. Not that we know that yet. But do you think that even if that was the case, the medical powers that be would come out and say, well, the presence of this virus is a risk factor in certain patients, therefore we should work to mitigate those other risk factors? That would be anathema to their profit models. The profit models of virology and healthcare are trains hurtling down the side of a mountain. They have too much momentum to stop on a dime like that, and there's too much incentive and willpower to keep them from doing that. And there are two ways to control people. You can use fear. Fear is the mind killer. Really absorb what that means. That means that anyone who has incentive to impair your ability to think logically will try to put fear in you. Fear is the mind killer. The other one is money and status. Money and status rewire people's brains, and their survival brain makes it so that they don't even notice that rewiring. Now you have these kids graduating in huge amounts of debt, and their bosses are telling them, I'm going to make you a scientist. You're going to get a paycheck. Here's a lab coat. Just research this virus, which everyone knows causes this disease. Those kids are going to have no incentive to undermine that status and that paycheck. You would be surprised the blind spots you can develop because of status and money. And for anyone who has difficulty believing that an entire field could be operating with bad methodology, I don't know why you would think that. Tobacco, margarine, sugar. How did the health research community not see the danger of those things sooner? Were they all in on it? Or does giving someone a paycheck and status allow for the creation of blind spots wherever the validity of that paycheck and that status would be called into question? So beware of anyone who tries to put you on a pedestal. Putting you on a pedestal is a way to control you. Also, true fans of the scientific method know there's a lot of danger when you start looking for things in tests and experiments. When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. It's an old adage of science that when you go looking for things, you will invariably find them. And as Carrie Mullis said, you can find almost anything with a PCR test. You could probably use a PCR test to prove that I'm a triceratops. So I'm just saying, if I wanted to create a global conspiracy centered around something scientific, after decades of zombie and survival horror movies that seemingly came out of nowhere, I wouldn't pick bacteria or fungus or legionnaires, something provable, something solid to center my conspiracy around. I would pick a field of study that was already known to have serious methodological problems. I would pick virology. And that is all that I've got for you today.